Justin Haskins is a good friend of the program. He is the editorial director of the Heartland Institute, editor-in-chief of StoppingSocialism.com, and co-writer of the next book that is coming out, The Great Reset. Justin, how are you, sir?
Oh, I'm doing so well, Glenn. So well.
Yeah.
Great to be with you.
Yeah. So this is not going to go over well for those who think that everybody who listens to talk radio is a moron. You just did a poll and wanted to find out, who knows the news, who knows the general topics in the news, who knows about the police shootings and climate change, who knows? What'd you find?
Right. So what we wanted to do was go beyond just looking at bias in the news media. We all know that MSNBC and CNN and, ABC, CBS, NBC, we all know that they're left-leaning outlets and that people who watch them probably have left-leaning opinions. But what we wanted to know was what do they understand about the facts, not opinions, related to important news stories, and just how detached from reality are they? Because my suspicion was it's pretty darn detached. And so what we did was we asked them a whole bunch of questions about media preferences, and then we asked them a bunch of questions, factual questions about things going on in the news. We asked them about the national debt. We asked them about police shootings, climate change questions, the proportion of the population that's uninsured or doesn't have health coverage. And then we were able to compare these two things to see if there is a difference. It's a very large poll, likely voters. And what we found was overwhelmingly, in the vast majority of questions that we asked, the people who watch NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN, and MSNBC regularly, who identified it as their favorite network, were far more likely to get these questions about facts wrong. In some cases, wildly wrong, compared to people who watch conservative media television, and especially people who get most of their news from talk radio. Talk radio was actually the audience that was most likely to get these questions right, above all other kinds of categories. But generally speaking, all conservative media way outperformed these liberal outlets.
So tell me, were there differences on climate change? Did they know the hot button issues for the left, like, who lacks insurance, health care insurance, who, how warm is the temperature going to be in 2050? I mean, was there any question where they excelled?
There were two questions where they did better than conservatives on average. And those questions were, in some ways, I think, kind of a mistake. One was how many white people are shot, unarmed white people are fatally shot by police. They were more likely to get that right, but they were much more likely to get the question about unarmed African Americans fatally shot by police wrong. And so the gap between whites and blacks, they were way, way off. To give people an idea of just what we're talking about here, 81% of MSNBC viewers, 70% of CNN, and more than 70% of the viewers of ABC, CBS, and NBC said that there are at least 50 fatal police shootings of unarmed African Americans every year. That's at least double the real number, which is about 18, according to the Washington Post database. And then a significant proportion, dramatically overestimated the number of fatal police shootings of unarmed African Americans. So 1/4 of CNN viewers, for example, said there were at least 500 unarmed African Americans killed every year by police. That's 5,000 over the course of a decade compared to less than 200.
Okay, so doesn't that make sense, though? I mean, you wouldn't think that this kind of coverage would go to something that affected 18 people. There are more than 18 people that die in a swimming pool every year. I mean, it's really quite shocking when you actually know the numbers. But if you don't know the numbers, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if people would say 1,000 people are killed because it's an epidemic. It's happening everywhere.
Right.
Wouldn't you think?
That's exactly right. In fact, 10% of CNN's audience did think that there were 1,000 African Americans who were unarmed killed every year by police.
10%. Wow.
Yeah. And so what this shows beyond any doubt is that coverage that these people are getting, because when we asked conservatives, they were getting these questions right at a much, much higher rate. So what it shows is that...
Give me the talk radio listeners. What did they say?
For which question?
For the number of unarmed blacks killed by police officers.
Okay, sure. Just let me look it up real quick. But yeah, there's no doubt whatsoever that when we asked about any of these questions, they were far more likely to get it wrong. Talk radio was 60%. So 60% of talk radio listeners got the correct answer, which was less than 50. Compared to CNN, it was 23%. MSNBC, 19%. That gives you an illustration of just how detached from reality a lot of these people are. And it's not just on police shootings. It's on the national debt. It's on it's on virtually every question that we ask. When we asked about the national debt, for example, 69% of CBS viewers and 65, this is just an example, 65% of NBC viewers and 69% of CBS viewers said that the national debt was much lower than it actually was. And about 30% of CNN and 32% of CBS viewers said the national debt was $5 trillion or less. $5 trillion.
Oh, my gosh.
The last time that the national debt was $5 trillion was in 1995.
$5 trillion. How could it be $5 trillion when they're talking about passing another $4 trillion package? I mean,
exactly.
Hello.
Exactly. And so it's on climate change. About half of all MSNBC viewers, ABC, CBS, NBC, about half of them, in fact, more than half of them, said that they think that all of humanity will either be extinct or nearly extinct within 100 years. And a quarter of them said that they'll be extinct within 50 years because of climate change.
So 75% of MSNBC viewers think that within the next 50 to 100 years, we'll all be dead?
Half. Because half of the people who said within 100 years said within 50 years. So it's 50% of all the viewers, 50%. 25% said less than 50. Right. So 50%.
What's the other 50? What's the other 50% say?
Most of the other 50% said that it will happen, but it will just take more than 100 years.
Okay. All right. So we're dead either way.
We're eventually going to die from climate change was the overall.
Yes, okay. All right.
but if you really believe that we're going to go, the whole human race is going to go extinct within 100 years, that means that a majority of people watching these networks believe that their grandchildren will die from climate change. That's what it means. I mean, that is totally insane, but that's the message that they're getting from the press. So this isn't just about opinions. We all know that people who are watching these networks are going to have liberal opinions. This is about them not even having – how can you form a good opinion when you don't have even the basic information about these topics right? And if you're watching those networks, you are not getting even the basic facts right about any of these topics.
We know that to be true. We absolutely know that to be true. In our own lives, we've all met somebody who is a liberal, and if you get the opportunity to talk to them about the news, I don't know anything about that. They say that all the time. I didn't say, where'd you get that? Thinking that you're going to get that from, and usually it's like the New York Times even printed that. They're not impacted because even if their source does do the story, it does it once, and they're drilling down on everything else. Did you ask any political questions about Trump or Biden or anything about socialism?
We did ask about Biden's approval rating, and it was actually it was interesting. As you would expect, the conservative media outlets did not have people who watch those outlets do not have a particularly fond view of Joe Biden. Less than 20% approval across the board for those people. Usually it was even less than that. But for CNN, and it was actually much lower than I thought, and ABC, CBS as well. The average CNN viewer strong approval for Biden was 57%, which is not super high. ABC was 45%, CBS was 48%. If you add in somewhat approved, those numbers go up to the 70s or so, depending on the network that you're looking at. MSNBC was far and away Biden's network, 90% approved and to some degree, and 70% had strong approval. But
wow,
it's not as much as you would expect, without any doubt at all. I mean, certainly the average Fox News viewer or the average Blaze viewer or something would have a much higher opinion of Donald Trump if you're looking at similar polls that have been done in the past than liberal viewers of these networks have of Joe Biden right now. So he's not off to a very good start.
Your big takeaway from this?
I think one of the biggest takeaways, beyond just the fact that people who are watching these networks are just not getting the truth, and so they shouldn't watch them, is that one of the most stunning things about this whole poll is that a significant proportion of people who say that they watch these liberal outlets don't believe that the liberal outlets are liberal. They actually think that most of the news that they're getting is either somewhat conservative or mostly conservative.
That's
more
crazy.
Than half CNN viewers and more than half of MSNBC viewers, for example, in fact, more than 60% said that they think that most of the news that they get is somewhat conservative or mostly conservative. So they have no idea that the news that they're watching is actually incredibly liberal news.
They've never met a conservative. If they think that how do they know that conservatives despise CNN and all these other outlets and think that they are full of nothing but leftist propaganda? How do they square that circle? Do
I
they
have
just
absolutely no idea.
I mean, it is a bizarre world we're living in.